decade, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. With Dave Minuk, with Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mindell, here with you for the next couple hours, talking about the Winnipeg Jets. The midst of the All-Star break, the Jets having played 42 games this year, another 40 to go on the regular season calendar, and they're going to be facing an uphill climb to expand the game total past number 40. Gentlemen, good to see you on this Saturday morning. Dave M is not, in fact, being held hostage. He's just in a bit of a different locale.
Dave, are you in a psychiatrist office right now?
So let me tell you guys about my feelings. This is what I think about both of you.
Yeah. It's not Festivus, but you have some airing of grievances.
Oh, I'd have some grievances.
Yeah.
Like in that chair, Dave looks like he's ready to talk about his childhood and talk about like having to deal with me for the last 13 years.
I had a good childhood. Rupert's Land Boulevard. It was good.
Dave did enjoy his time on Rupert's Land. That's true. Now then, he's the king of the North End of Winnipeg. Move over, whatever the North End Rick or whatever his name is. Dave is the real king of the North End. Ezzy, you're looking resplendent in your new IC hat, looking sharp there, buddy.
Thanks, Drew. Yeah, shout out to Ty from La Brokerie, who is handling the IC merchandise. I just got this hat about, Dave, about 12 hours ago. Dave M dropped it off at my house. Got a toque as well, and I just took the sticker off right before we went live on air. So yeah, I've wanted this IC fitted hat for probably 5 years now, and it looks sweet. Drew's rocking the hoodie. Dave's got the same hat as I have on, and obviously, everybody else who bought merchandise has got it at this point. It was a little bit delayed, but we know that COVID has screwed up the supply chain and everything like that. So yeah, we're ready to go, boys. Our bar mitzvah show.
Our bar mitzvah show, indeed. It was 13 years ago yesterday that the Illegal Curve Hockey Show first debuted on Winnipeg, then radio airwaves. I don't know what it says about us, guys, that the two radio stations that we've been on have both basically shut down since we were on their airwaves. I don't know.
Drew,
if
I've said it before. If a pandemic and a radio station being shut down doesn't shut down Illegal Curve, then basically nothing will.
It's true. We are the Twinkie of Winnipeg radio. Nothing can hurt a Twinkie, as a famous person once said. That
I'm just glad that you didn't say cockroaches.
Well, I mean, I was being a little bit polite. I mean, I'm sure some of the people who dislike us would call us cockroaches. But
who dislikes us?
I'm sure there are some people. It's hard. I mean, I dislike
a few.
You guys.
There's maybe like 3 people.
But as a collective, I'm sure there are some people who.
Oh, there's a collective. There's an anti-illegal curve collective.
There's an anti-illegal curve collective.
They've been selling T-shirts. They've been selling their own T-shirts. There's actually there's an X over the IC logo.
Exactly. They went. They're countering our merchandise sales. That's okay. Whatever it might be, we say good morning to everybody and thanks so much for joining us, like you have been for the past 13 years. We're going to talk about the Winnipeg Jets throughout the entirety of today's show. Of course, no games to talk about aside from Tuesday's debacle in Philadelphia, which we already covered, and we know that was just another game in what has been a collection, more than a collection, a frequency of bad games for this Winnipeg Jets team. They are towards the bottom of the Central Division, a place that people did not expect them to be. 18-17-7, 43 points in 42 games. It's an uphill climb. They have a boulder on their back as they have to try and make that climb, but they have no one to blame other than themselves for their struggles and for their inconsistent play for the entirety of this season thus far, gentlemen.
So we're going to get right into the Jets. I thought we were going to talk about the skills competition, Drew. I thought we could do at least 10 minutes on Joe Pavelski shooting pucks at large cards for the blackjack competition, but obviously you want to get right into the Jets. That's fine.
Well, to be perfectly honest, Ezzy, I don't know what you're talking about. The skills. I saw the Trevor Zegras blindfold thing.
That was insane.
Which was pretty cool.
That was awesome. That was one of the best things I've ever seen at a skills competition.
First of all, you know what? I have to give. I never watch the skills ever. I don't watch the All-Star. I mean, I don't think I've watched the All-Star since like It was Wales versus Camels, and I think it was like a 1917 game. That was actually very entertaining. But
shout out to Mike Gartner, right?
He had 4 goals that game. But anyways, so I generally do not, but I happened to watch the NHL ones last night for some reason, and I have
Vegas, baby, Bellagio.
I did get a lot of Vegas. Like I really wanted to just.
I've stayed there before. No big deal.
Hashtag no big deal. But it was one of those things. Like I was like, okay, whatever. And so we're watching, and all of a sudden you see the skills, and I got to give those guys kudos. Like I thought that they, it was very NBA-ish. They brought out they had some personality, which we're generally loath to see from or players are loath to provide. So I thought that was actually a good thing, and I like the way Zegras did his. I like the way Hughes did his, and so I just thought
that was the Devils equipment manager's son. I don't know if you guys saw that.
I saw someone tweeted that. I saw that.
Yeah, that was awesome.
But yeah, so I mean, like it was like that was, but it was entertaining, and obviously there was some like the standard. I like that they changed it up. Shooting on the Bellagio fountains was kind of neat, and then as just said, shooting the cards. So yeah, I wouldn't be one. Let's put it this way: I will not be watching the actual game tonight because I can't be bothered. But
you have anything better to do?
Well, yeah, but the skills actually was like I said. I thought it was. I generally wouldn't watch it, but I happened to, and it was fairly entertaining.
Well, we know, guys, the skills competitions are always better than the game. Same thing with NBA, right? Like we seem to talk about this every time there's an NHL All-Star game, but I think more people get excited for, the 3-point shooting and the jam competition, the slam dunk competition, as opposed to the actual game. So if you're going to go
the jam competition,
well, yeah, I called it the jam competition.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that you called
slam
it
dunk competition.
Yeah.
Obviously I'm a hockey guy, right, Drew?
I was going to say, I could have let it go, but I really just couldn't. I mean, it was just sitting there, and I had to smoke that one out of the ballpark a little bit.
Snoop Doggy Dog.
There you go. In any event, Ezzy's a big fan of all the jam competitions. But let's get back to the Winnipeg Jets. They restart on Tuesday, against the Minnesota Wild. And really, I mean, I think you can probably, say that Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, and then the following Monday, 4 straight games against divisional opponents.
5, actually.
Pardon me, 5. You're right. You got Minnesota again the following Wednesday. I mean, by Wednesday the 16th, I think you can say for sure if there's a possibility or not. Right now, I mean, the pulse is faint right now as we sit here in the midst of the All-Star break. But by Wednesday,
like our pulse is faint, or the Jets' pulse is faint.
Our pulse is always faint. But
Dave M and I have a good pulse going. Yeah,
we should see a medical professional about that. But by next Wednesday, you'll know for sure if it's a possibility. Because if they come out and you lay an egg over the next 5 games, then you're not only got the boulder behind you, but you're basically 6 feet. You're 6 feet buried, and you got the dirt shoveled on top of you. So they know that. But whether or not they can do anything about it, whether or not they can finally show some consistency in a season where they've been anything but, or the only consistency they've shown is really struggling, then you'll know the answer to whether or not this team has a chance or not.
Yeah, the next 5 games against the Central Division are key. I mean, the last few games were key as well, right? Like we talked about it. That game against Philadelphia was a must-win game, and it's unfortunate that the Jets couldn't follow up an impressive performance in St. Louis, with no Ehlers, no Morrissey. And then obviously they get Morrissey back for the game against Philadelphia, but his presence obviously, didn't help the Jets. They had, a good period and a half. I think we said on the post-game show, definitely the third period was not very good for the Jets. But you're right, Drew. I mean, you've got 2 games against the Wild of the first 5 games after the All-Star break, but it's going to be uphill even after that. But you're right. If you lose even 3 of those 5 games, I mean, you're pretty much out of it, right, guys? Like I think the Athletic put up the odds. I mean, there's a bunch of sites that have the odds of the Jets making the playoffs. It's at the very least, it's less than 20%. It's probably more around 10%. Right. So it's going to be an uphill climb, not only to start February, but for the rest of the season. So you're going to have to win, 7 or 8 of 10, for at least the first, 20 games, right? Like you can't just win a couple, lose a couple. You can't win. Even 3 of 5 is probably not going to cut it. Just do the math. You're probably going to need between 93 and 95 points, right? So that means the Jets are probably going to have to win 22 to 24 games of their last 40. something like that.
To get into the playoffs over the last 40 games of the season here, Dave, you're probably looking at a team that has to collect a points percentage right around close to 700. Right, probably have to get that kind of points percentage,
and that's why I said, Drew, 7 or 8 of 10, not just for 10 games, like that's what you're gonna have to win for the majority of the season. So that's right. that translates to 24 or 25 wins,
which is is certainly a difficult task, but they it's hard to believe that this team clearly which got all the hype in the offseason and clearly didn't deserve all the hype they got is where they're at right now. I mean, it's that everybody has been so wrong about this team speaks to something, either our analysis, and when I say our, I mean the hockey world's analysis was completely off when they looked at the team on paper, and everybody who's on that paper has regressed dramatically, and nobody expected that, or there's something else afoot, or there's something, chemistry, the mix, the makeup, the coaching, the front office, the players, top to bottom, something else has got to be wrong if this is how dramatically the Jets have fallen in the first 42 games of this season, Dave.
Well, I don't think that's an unfair statement, Drew. I think that there was good reason to be, for there to be collective excitement from the fan base. I think that, analysis from the hockey world, the media world, if you will, was not. I mean, again, the Jets didn't go and acquire 4 first line or first pairing defensemen, but they upgraded their defense from what they had last season, and they still had Connor Hellebuyck in net, and they had a forward core that was going to be, just as deep and solid as they've been traditionally. So, with that expectation, I don't think it was unfair for a lot of the assessments that we heard at the beginning of the season, but that's the reason why you play games, because, with all due respect to modeling, it's predictive. It's not
like hand modeling, Dave.
Yes, hand modeling is, but okay. I think
Dave was not master of his own domain, though.
Anyways, so what I was saying is that you've got. I mean, you have to play the games, and we saw from what we've seen. I mean, really, 2 Jets players probably 3 Jets players in my mind have exceeded expectations this entire season. Right? You've got Pierre-Luc Dubois, you've got Kyle Connor, and you got Josh Morrissey, and those 3 guys probably are the 3 for me at least who have been above and beyond. And the problem is the rest of the team has been fairly mediocre. And again, like I said, the good news is it's the entire team. I don't think you need more from Mark Scheifele. You need more from Adam Lowry. We talked about center depth and where's the center depth supposedly. Andrew Kopp's having a good season. There are other guys, but I was going to
say I'd maybe throw in Evgeny Svechnikov in there, Dave, too.
Well, yeah, for sure. But I mean, the guy, unfortunately, he gets 3 minutes a game, and now he's apparently in the doghouse because he's being healthy scratched in favor of, Christian Vesalainen, who I'm not entirely certain what he's doing on a nightly basis. And again, he's not really in a great role because he doesn't I don't think he was drafted to be a checking forward on the 4th line. But, I think part of the issue is that you just have Connor Hellebuyck is not having a Connor Hellebuyck-like season. Mark Scheifele is not having a Mark Scheifele-like season. And if your best aren't your best, well, it's hard for the role players to elevate to the level of your best. And because that's the reason why they're role players. And I think as a result, you got a Jets team that isn't firing on all cylinders. And is it possible they put together a run like they did or like they have in the past? It's going to have to be one hell of a run. And the problem is the earliest you're getting Nikolai Ehlers back is the 14th of February. So he's gone for at least a week after when the Wild game, I think, would be his first game. The Chicago game is the 14th, and then the Wild is the 16th.
Right. So he's missing at least the next, unless he comes back on that Monday, which would be sort of hard to believe that he'd be ready necessarily for that Monday. It's likely he's missing at least the first 4 games after the All-Star break.
Yeah. And Dave Lowry was asked about it by, I think, Jeff Hamilton on the road, and he made it sound like he wasn't going to be a player anytime soon. So now in soon from a coach's perspective, especially one like Lowry, who's not super verbose, that could literally mean the next game, and he could just be focusing on the next game. But it sure sounded like it wasn't going to be a while. So you're not going to have Nikolai Ehlers as one of your best dynamic forwards for at least the next 4 games. And as I said, the next 4 critical games. So you're going to have to figure out a way to be able to do what you did in St. Louis for the next 4 games. And then at least you're back in the conversation and you're not looked at as sellers. Because like, if you read articles right now online, that other cities are looking at what they can peel away from the Winnipeg Jets. Is Andrew Kopp available? Is Paul Stastny available? Is Jansen Harkins available? So
I would throw a name out there, and it hasn't been talked about a lot. But given the Jets' depth on defense, would the Jets make a guy like Dylan DeMello available? He's signed to a very reasonable contract for the next couple seasons. You might be able, and can the Jets afford to have a guy in Dylan DeMello? He's got a modified no trade clause, I might add. Can the Jets afford to have a guy like him for $3 million per season on their back end for the next couple of years, when you have clearly all this young defensive talent getting ready to rise up, looking, if not already ready for the NHL level, but close to ready for the NHL level? Does his name get bandied about?
Well, I would say that maybe Brendan Dillon makes more sense to me, just because all the good young D prospects, not all of them, most of them are on the left side, right? We've talked about that. Nola, Sandberg, Chisholm, right? So you've got Johnny Kovacevic obviously on the right side, Drew, but I mean, put it this way, I think teams will be probably inquiring about him. I mean, if I'm the GM, which thank God I'm not, I would not be considering trading Dylan. I really like DeMello. Like, I think his absence has really been felt in the lineup. Like, obviously, Josh Morrissey's has as well, and he's back. But I mean, I think DeMello is just that quiet. We know exactly what he is. He's a great defensive defenseman, right? I actually think that, I wouldn't have a problem with, Morrissey and DeMello being the pair when, everyone's healthy. I really like that pair. And then maybe you have Stanley and Schmidt. I realize that, that makes Schmidt a third pairing defenseman, but I just like Morrissey and DeMello. I think DeMello brings out the best in Morrissey. And then obviously Morrissey, has a little bit more freedom to jump up, but it's not out of the realm of possibility, Drew. But, to Dave's point, like, we're talking about, how the next 4 or 5 games are really critical, which they are. And the last 4 or 5 games have really been critical as well. But I think you also have to start, almost looking bigger picture and saying, well, if the best the Jets are going to be able to do is get that second wild card spot, or maybe, the first wild card spot, like, it's mathematically impossible, basically, guys, for the Jets to finish top 3 or even top 4 in the Central Division. Not mathematically possible, but it's virtually impossible. You've got, Colorado, who's 22 or 23 points ahead of the Jets, and then Minnesota and Nashville are way ahead. So you're looking at a wild card spot, and then you have to ask yourself, well, if the Jets are able to grab that wild card spot, I mean, what's the ceiling here for this team? Like, are the Jets just going to be fodder for the Colorado Avalanche? Because if the Jets and Avalanche are going up in a first round series, we know who's going to be heavily favored. Not to say that the Jets can't beat them, because Connor Hellebuyck is the great equalizer. But I agree with Dave. Like, Hellebuyck has not had the type of season that we've expected from Hellebuyck the last 4 or 5 years. And obviously, it's not Hellebuyck's fault. Like, he is an excellent goaltender. We're going to have John Matisz on next hour, and just a little bit of a spoiler alert, but he is still considered by goalie experts as one of the elite goaltenders in the NHL, along with Shesterkin and Vasilevsky, right? So it's not like Hellebuyck has lost it and he's on the decline. It's just noticeable that, whether you want to look at the goals saved above expectation, Dave, or if you want to just look at, pure save percentage. I mean, Hellebuyck he's not a Vezina finalist, as it stands right now. He's probably not even in the top 5. Right,
no,
which
it's the middle of the road. I mean, look, part of today's show, we are going to talk about the players that are meeting our expectations, are below expectations, and are exceeding our expectations. And I don't put all the blame on Connor Hellebuyck for the Jets' struggles this year.
It's just a piece of the puzzle, right, Drew? Like, it's just one piece of the puzzle.
I would say he's below expectations for his performance this year. I mean, for the most, there's been some flashes, but much like the vast majority of this team, he's been below average in my books for what you expect from him. Now, what we've come to expect has been otherworldly for the last number of years. But this year, when people thought, hey, the Jets, Connor Hellebuyck isn't going to have the same workload, he's not going to have the same. The team isn't going to rely on him as heavily as they have in years past to be unbelievable in order to get this team a win. Well, there's been nights where he's been at best average, and probably too many nights where he's been at best average, Dave.
Yeah, and I do think that's a function of the coaching staff playing him too much. And I understand that the games have been spread out, so it's allowed for him to have some nights off. But, and look, he played a good game in Pittsburgh when they went back to him rather than, using Mikkel Burden, which we weren't sure of. And I think, like I said, when Eric Comrie played, and then when he didn't get the call in against the Flyers, and fans were losing their mind. And I thought, how ironic is it that fans are losing their mind that Eric Comrie, who, when we mentioned that Eric Comrie was going to be starting on Saturday against the Blues, were tweeting at us saying, "Here comes the tank." And then when he plays a great game, I don't think it's a lack of confidence in playing Eric Comrie, but of course, what happened to the Jets, right? You have a COVID situation with Comrie, so the games that you think he's going to play, he doesn't end up playing. Mikkel Burden isn't having a great season. He had his last game was a decent one when he played in Milwaukee for, I think he had a 2-0 shutout, but he hasn't been having a great season by any stretch of the imagination. So, there's an element, though, I was a little surprised, just because you think you'd want to see what you have in him at the NHL level rather than just in a preseason game. But I think that the one thing we're going to see is, and it'll probably benefit the Jets and Connor Hellebuyck, is he won't play as much. And they don't have an option. Like, sometimes we talk about coaches' hands being forced, giving a player an opportunity. Oftentimes, when people are like, oh, well, of course he got that. Well, no, generally he gets that opportunity because someone got injured. Like, I remember I was looking back, Kyle Connor only came into the lineup not because he had 5 goals in 4 games in the AHL his second season. It was because Matthew Perreault got injured and went on IR. And then Kyle Connor got his chance to come up with the Jets and, of course, never looked back. So decisions are often made for coaches. They don't make them and suddenly become brilliant. And I think that in this instance, you're going to have an opportunity for Eric Comrie to play more games, which, like, Connor Hellebuyck might want to play all the games, but it just looks like it's grinding on him and it's getting to him because he's not the crisp Connor Hellebuyck that we're used to seeing. So I think that, getting kind of having regular starts still, and he'll still play 75% of the games, but having Eric Comrie come in and take some of those games off of his hands. And if he can play like he did in St. Louis, which I think he's capable of doing, well, that'll be good for the Winnipeg Jets, in all aspects.
And like Dave said, Drew, like, you've got 2 back-to-backs in your first 6 games, right? Like, you've got Dallas, Nashville on the road, and then you've got Minnesota and Seattle, I believe it is, at home, right? Mm-hmm. So two back-to-backs right away. So Dave makes a good point that there's no option there. I don't think, unless something, I think, unforeseen happens, we're expecting it to be Hellebuyck first game, then Comrie. I mean, it might be, I guess, Comrie, but, tradition usually says that Hellebuyck will get the first game of the back-to-back. So you're going to see Comrie most likely twice in the first 6 games after the All-Star break. But even after that, Dave, with a really heavy schedule in March, I repeat, 16 games, boys, in the month of March. I wouldn't be surprised, right? Like, if you see Comrie even as much as 4 or 5 times out of those 16 games, like, you can't run Hellebuyck 14 times out of 16 games. Like, it's not just because of the fact that you hopefully are in the playoff race and you want to keep him fresh come mid-April when the playoffs start. I mean, it's just not good, going forward for a guy's health, both physical and mental. So I agree. I think those 13 games in a row, the game against Vancouver, boys, 3 games ago was the one that really surprised me, and I think surprised all of us. We really thought Comrie was going to get that start at home, but obviously, that's history is in the rearview mirror right now. But there's no doubt that Hellebuyck has not been his normal self, and Dave mentioned earlier Scheifele. I mean, it's somebody that you don't want to necessarily talk about this much, but whether or not you like the plus-minus stat, he's got the worst plus-minus on the team, and he just hasn't been the same Scheifele. Mike McIntyre is coming up in about 5 minutes. He wrote a really good article, and I don't think everybody agreed with Mike in terms of his assessment on Scheifele, because if you look at his points, guys, he's still doing fairly well, right? Like, he's at, 0.8 points per game. What does he have? 33 points or something like that. So, like, he's got his points. It's just that his overall game is just not, he hasn't had the same impact this year that he has in previous years.
Yeah, and there's no question about that. And I think that is the one area that everybody is looking at for the Jets, at the one player in particular who, if this Jets team would unexpectedly turn their season around in the second half, it's going to be Mark Scheifele, who has to be the driver, who has to be the catalyst, who has to be the guy whose game elevates the most in which to get the team back to where they want to be. Whether or not they can do that, And I'm frankly skeptical because we haven't seen any evidence of it for the most part, other than, fleeting glimpses for one game at a time scattered throughout a whole bunch of losses. That will, time will tell if that's a reality or not. And that time will likely be within the first week after the All-Star break, because you'll know, as we said, with those 5 straight games against divisional opponents, you'll know if the Jets if their pulse gets stronger, or if they're just going to continue to play out the string in the second half of the season. Let's head to break. When we come back, as we mentioned, Mike McIntyre is going to join us. We'll continue our deep dive into the struggles of the Winnipeg Jets. Stay with us. We're celebrating 13 years of broadcasting the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on a Saturday morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, it's Aaron from Bernstein's Deli.
That's right, Ezzy. I'm the guy who makes all your sandwich dreams come true.
So when you think Illegal Curve, what comes to you?
How about juicy chicken schnitzel, grilled salami, fried onions, melted cheddar cheese, and honey mustard on toasted, thick-cut city rye bread?
Man, that's like the holy grail of sandwiches.
And so it shall be known as the Illegal Curve Sandwich.
The Illegal Curve Sandwich. Try it today at Bernstein's Deli. Find us at Corridon and Lanark or online at bernsteinsdeli.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whitened my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Bottom of the hour. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mindell, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you. Our buddy Mike McIntyre set to join us in a couple moments. We'll be pleased to welcome Mike to the show. I thought his column that you mentioned there, Ezzy, or Dave, I can't remember which one of you said it, a few earlier this week, I think was dead on. He said basically that Mark Scheifele has not looked the same since that hit against the Montreal Canadiens in the playoffs last year.
Of course you agree. That's been your point for 6 months.
It has been my point for 6 months. And I truly do agree that, Mark Scheifele is a guy who always looked like hockey was fun to him. And I don't want to necessarily play amateur psychiatrist or amateur psychologist.
Well, Dave's actually in the psychiatrist chair, so he should probably handle the psychology.
He can handle that role. Mark Scheifele.
Drew, tell me what you think about Mark Scheifele.
Well, I'm going to tell you exactly.
Drew's like Dr. Melfi right now.
Yeah.
More like Dr. Kevorkian.
Dr. Kevorkian was I don't think he was a psychiatrist though, Dave.
No, he wasn't.
Yeah, Dr. Melfi was.
I know.
Okay,
But you remind me, you're more of a Grim Reaper type. So
thank you, David. I appreciate that.
Like Stu Grimson.
In any event, Mark Scheifele was always a guy I think who had an element of joy to his hockey game, to the way he played, and it truly looks like since that hit, the joy has gone out of his game. And we'll bring in Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press now to continue the good conversation about the Winnipeg Jets. We say good morning, Mike.
Morning, Mike.
How are you? Nice to see you.
Doing really well. Happy anniversary, fellas.
Thank you. Very kind of you. I hope that I assume you just gave you have an envelope with a check in it in accordance with Bar-Mitzvah traditions.
Well, as long as I can get some of that food that you guys were talking about on Twitter. I mean,
no, we've got some party sandwiches for you. We've got some tuna, some egg salad. Yeah, we'll hook you up.
Bar Mitzvah pizza.
Just as long as the egg salad doesn't have celery.
Celery and egg salad is your bugaboo?
It is. Yes, that's
Yeah,
where
I'm with you on that one, Mike.
That's the hill that I'm willing to die on, guys.
Okay, that's good to know. I'm not sure if I've ever had an egg salad with celery in it, but it's good to know that you have.
Drew's been egged before, though.
That's true. I've been egged, but I haven't had egg salad with celery. But it's always good to have boundaries, and boundaries are important, Mike. We were just talking about your column that you wrote in the Free Press a few days ago about Mark Scheifele and about the Jets in general and about sort of this last 40 games of the season and how they're going to need to really change the entirety of how they've played through the first 42 games if they want there to be any playoff games after that. And you focused on Mark Scheifele, and you made a comment that I've been saying on the show, and I agree wholeheartedly with that. It seems like the joy that he used to play with has sort of been out of his game since he leveled the hit in the playoffs on the Montreal Canadiens. It's almost like it's something flipped at that point in time. And I think he's still struggling with the aftermath, including, I think, to some degree, the social media vitriol that him and his family experienced as a result of that hit.
Yeah, I had a number of people reach out after I wrote that column and saying things along those lines as well, Drew, that, they wonder just how much what happened kind of off the ice there and the reaction to that and how much that's weighing on Scheifele. And I wouldn't discount that at all. This has been, for a number of reasons, this has been a trying couple of years for all of us, right? And Mark Scheifele also had COVID this year. And we don't know the full extent of. We believe that it was asymptomatic from what was said, but that doesn't mean that, there's not some issues with that as well. So there's a lot of things that we don't know. All we do know, of course, is what we see, 42 times, or I guess he hasn't played all 42, but what we see kind of during the three periods that he's on the ice each night. And that's left a lot to be desired for sure. And has inevitably raised some questions, not only about his game and his motivation, but I would say his future as well. But I'm always willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. And I wrote in my piece that I'd love to explain what's going on, but I have no idea as well. And so I wouldn't rule out that there's other things besides, this is a 28-year-old athlete who should be in the prime of his career. This is not somebody who's on, the back nine of their career where we would expect him to be going downhill. And in fact, you look at all the things Mark Scheifele said, even going into last season, where, he welcomed the opportunity to go head to head with the Matthews and the McDavids because he wanted to be seen in that same scope as them. And so where has that guy gone? And, it's one of a number of questions regarding Mark Scheifele for sure.
I agree with everything that you said there, Mike. And also in the column that you wrote for the Winnipeg Free Press, you mentioned, he didn't play the last, I think it was 3.5 minutes or 4 minutes against the Canucks. So Dave Lowry obviously, was not treating, Scheifele and Wheeler with kid gloves, maybe, being a little harder on him than Paul Maurice, even though obviously, Lowry hasn't been head coach for that long. But, is it safe to say that Scheifele just needs to get himself out of this, like find a way to get himself back to playing his A game? Because obviously Ehlers isn't coming back until the earliest, I believe the 14th or the 15th. So I think most of us expect, Ehlers to go back on the wing with Scheifele, right? I mean, that's kind of, the perfect, cure for some struggles, to have a guy that's a zone entry machine. But like, to me, it seems like, he's been benched, he's had COVID, he's had all of the different things that have, challenged him this year. But it seems like Mark Scheifele is going to just have to dig deep and get himself back to playing his A game, or the Jets are going to miss the playoffs.
Yeah, there's no lifeline, being thrown his way by the looks of it. And the closest thing the Jets might have to that right now, and I'm sure Mark Scheifele would love to be in the Cole Perfetti spot. He's probably saying, you know what, coach, I'm willing to play right wing. I'll give up center if you put me with those two guys. And look, I mean, isn't it strange how times change, right? For the longest time, a lot of people used to think that it was Kyle Connor who was kind of riding the coattails of Scheifele and Wheeler, and that you could have thrown anybody with those two guys and they would have enjoyed success. Well, now we see that Kyle Connor, the all-star, is very much a play driver, a line driver. Pierre-Luc Dubois is as well. And a guy like Mark Scheifele, boy, he sure could use being paired with those players right now, right? And that's no slight against, Andrew Kopp or Paul Stastny, but let's be honest, he's not, or Blake Wheeler now, he's not with the same caliber of line mates that maybe he's had at times, whether that's Kyle Connor or Nikolai Ehlers, as you say. And, I think we're seeing that trio, certainly with Wheeler and Kopp, they've had their struggles. And I do wonder if Dave Lowry, when the Jets return to practice on Monday, I wonder if he would consider doing something else with that line. And I don't think you touch the Perfetti, Dubois, Connor. That would be insane. So your options are a little more limited, but it seems to me that's Mark Scheifele's not even on the top line anymore. That's not the top line for the Jets. That's the second line, I guess. But is that line? Are they getting enough from that trio right now? Is there something else he could do? I actually wondered out loud the other day in the Philly game whether Dave Lowry might move Andrew Kopp back with Adam Lowry and maybe move Paul Stastny up. I mean, might we see Stastny, Wheeler, Scheifele, and then you get Kopp back with Lowry and whoever else they want to put on that line, whether it's Harkins or Pagansky perhaps. But, there's not a whole lot, I think, with Ehlers still out of the lineup that maybe they could do to kind of get Scheifele going. But as you say, he's going to have to kind of find it within himself. And if he doesn't, the Jets are in big, big trouble, even more so than they are right now.
Now, Mike, would those be the Winnipeg Jets or would those be the North Dakota Jets? Because after Gary Bettman's comments, what did you take from those comments? Because to me, it seemed more like posturing than reality, given the fact that they're in the midst of the season. And I don't know how they're going to start making those sorts of adjustments. But what did you take away from the commissioner's comments yesterday?
Well, I think certainly locally it feels like that ship has sailed. The Jets kind of tried to move some games, and the fan base made it pretty clear that they weren't all that supportive of it. Mm-hmm. And so the Jets, pulled the plug on that little experiment. And, now starting Tuesday, they're going to have 50% capacity. We just heard from Dr. Rusin last week that by spring, it sounds like we could be moving to no restrictions. So, 50% should give way to 100% again fairly soon. Mm-hmm. I took from what Gary Bettman had to say, guys, that he probably, while it might have been referencing Winnipeg at one point, that it didn't really apply anymore to Winnipeg, given the direction we're heading. And,
mm-hmm.
It almost felt like this was more about Montreal, for example, where he basically came out and said, we're going to take the draft away from you if things don't change. And so I suspect, that's got to have to do with a team like Montreal would probably like to get some extra revenues going as well from their games if they're playing in empty buildings. So Yeah, it was curious. I mean, the whole thing with Batman, I wrote my column in today's paper on Batman, and the NHL has all kinds of fires burning right now. Gary Bettman tried his best to kind of, the everything is fine meme was kind of Gary Bettman yesterday. And among the many issues in the NHL is the state of things in Canada right now. And he conceded that that it's having a devastating impact economically, and I think not to be overlooked, guys, competitively. The competitive integrity of this season kind of went out the window a long time ago.
Yeah.
As soon as teams were starting to be forced to play with like 16 skaters, and we saw games where they had 5 defensemen or 10 forwards, the competitive integrity kind of went out the window. And now, the Jets went 5 weeks between home games, and then when they returned, there was no fans, or 250. So I think you can go ahead and slap a great big asterisk on this season, not unlike what we've done the last couple seasons, right?
Absolutely. Mike McIntyre, our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Saturday morning, we're live on our YouTube channel. We're live on all of our social media platforms. Mike, of course, is the columnist for the Winnipeg Free Press. And Mike, in that same column you wrote about Mark Scheifele, in parentheses, you talked about Kevin Cheveldayoff and maybe what his future is here in Winnipeg. If this season continues to go off the rails like it has through the first 40 games, what percentage odds would you put on there being a complete clean sweep of upper management and the coaching staff here in Winnipeg?
I put it, I mean, if they miss the playoffs and miss the playoffs significantly, and right now they're almost double digits out of a playoff spot, and these last 40 games are not going to be a picnic. I mean, if they can't show some semblance of being a legitimate contender in these last 40 games, then I got to think the percentage is probably up in the 75 to 90 range, like a full house cleaning. At that point, if you're True North, what other cards do you have left to play? You've already spent to the cap. You've locked up your core. You've made additions that were sort of touted as being impact additions. And if you end up, a mile out of the playoff race, the timing to me would suggest that you've got to go another direction. And not unlike the departure of Paul Maurice, I'm sure it would be handled, with diplomacy and whatnot. But it just seems to me that a full scale house cleaning, and that would include everything from the assistant coaches, and that's the direction they'd have to go. Now, obviously, there's time to avoid that. And these last 40 games, forget about maybe a playoff race, although the Jets would obviously like to work themselves back into that. But it feels like they're in a race here to save some jobs as well. And as well, I mean, the core as it stands today, we already know, Stasny and Kopp are pending UFAs. But aside from them, the future of some other guys on this team, core players, could very much be decided as well. And then the question is it Kevin Cheveldayoff who's making those decisions, or somebody else? And it'll be really interesting. Kevin Cheveldayoff, we had asked for him a couple of weeks ago. We were told, well, we're not quite at the official midway point, and so let's wait. And I appreciated the sense that they wanted to get maybe a little more runway under Dave Lowry, but he's going to talk next week, Kevin Cheveldayoff, his sort of usual state of the mid-season address. And the last time we heard from him, of course, was when Paul Maurice departed, and Kevin Cheveldayoff was pretty blunt that day that this is now at the feet of the players. There's no more excuses. He wanted them to get uncomfortable. The Jets, we can now see the Jets have actually regressed their record, their play. Since Paul Maurice has gone, there was a bit of a bump initially. I'm fascinated to see what Kevin Cheveldayoff has to say about this group, and maybe how much he shows his hand. Like, this is a guy who normally doesn't say a whole lot. So are we going to get that Kevin Cheveldayoff, or are we going to get a more desperate, urgent Kevin Cheveldayoff who's kind of laying all the cards out on the table? And, I don't know. But it's going to be very interesting to see.
Let me just follow up with Mike real quick. You talk about, players need to get uncomfortable. And there's, this has been the leadership group in this dressing room has been relatively consistent for the last number of years.
Right.
If they didn't get uncomfortable when Paul Maurice was dismissed, what's it going to take to get them uncomfortable? Because it seems to me that when you play that coaching card and then nothing really changes, and in fact you keep getting worse, it seems to me that you're almost out of options, because how firing the coach is the easier move, because trading away a number of your players, especially the core guys, the Wheelers, the Scheifeles. Wheeler and Scheifele, I'm going to identify them both because they're the core at this point. That would be the hardest to trade away, Wheeler especially. And a lot of the focus goes back to him and his approach as the captain, let's say.
Yeah, and the other question there is, what happens if you make players uncomfortable, but they don't respond in the way that you hope? The idea being you make them uncomfortable and then they react accordingly and you get the best from them. But what if actually it goes the other direction? Mm-hmm. And so again, to go back to a guy like Scheifele, we can see there's been some things happen that would have made Scheifele uncomfortable, including stapling him to the bench for the last 4 minutes of that St. Louis game last weekend after an atrocious giveaway, his team high third of the night. Almost leads to a goal. So you would have expected maybe that he comes out guns a-blazing a few nights later in Philadelphia. If he doesn't, again, you can only play that card so many times before it loses all impact. So you're right. I guess looking at the immediate fallout, one consequence, I guess, of not responding is they're probably going to say goodbye to Andrew Kopp and Paul Stastny. At least they should be, two pending UFAs. You're not buying at the deadline, and nor should you be retaining your UFAs if you could get something of value. So I suppose, from that perspective, you could kind of put that at the feet and say, well, you guys played like crap, so say goodbye to two really well-respected teammates that in a perfect world you would have kept here to be on the playoff run that you were supposed to be on. Instead, you kind of played them out of town. Other than that, for sure, in season, barring some big blockbuster trade, there isn't a whole lot you can do other than, I guess, ice time. Bring more kids in, and I suppose if this does become a lost season, I think if you're the Jets, you'd have to look at, we've seen a lot of the kids play, of course, but I think you give even more. And for example, I'd be getting Mikkel Burden a bunch of starts later in the year. If this becomes a lost season, see what you have in Burden then. Why not, right? He's a guy, it would be the perfect circumstance to get a look at him. So, for sure, options limited, but some hard questions have to be asked.
Mike, just pivoting to your column that you mentioned earlier, I was reading it while my kids were watching Paw Patrol and Peppa Pig, and I couldn't agree with you more, Mike. Like, the line I got the article up here, and the line is, the lack of action from Bettman is just as troubling. Obviously, that is in reference to Rocky Wirtz and his comments. Mark Lazarus, who, we've had on a legal curve. I'm sure, Mike, you've come across him, over the years. He's been covering the Blackhawks for a really long time, really well-respected guy. And he even said, I think on Twitter, that, he thought he was, throwing Wirtz a softball. And his response, and obviously we want to get your take on it because you wrote about it in your column, but I think his response was everything that is wrong with toxic hockey culture right now, right? Like, it looked like, an uncle or a grandpa who was, trying to lecture, his grandkids or his nephew for something that, that they did wrong. It was just so disrespectful. Obviously the statement was not written by him and was completely insincere. in my opinion. But, Bettman's saying that, well, the Blackhawks have had a tough year with everything that's gone on with Beach. Let's maybe focus on
Chris Beach has had a harder year.
Exactly. Let's focus on what Beach has gone through, not just the last year. Let's, the last 10 plus years, right? So what was kind of your overall impression on Bettman's tone? I guess if you've read the article, you know what your impressions are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it just speaks to, as you say, Ezzy, the toxic culture that permeates. And in a lot of ways, all the talk of change and learning from the past, I mean, that they just undid all that in one very public temper tantrum by Rocky Wirtz. And I found it so enlightening to see there was his son, the CEO, ready to answer the question. Mm-hmm. And Rocky Wirtz just uses that power imbalance. And we hear that term a lot when it comes to these sorts of issues of abuse that get covered up. The power imbalance that exists. We all saw the power imbalance on full display when Rocky Wirtz wouldn't let his own son answer a legitimate question and then gave this bizarre lecture / temper tantrum on stage and basically poured gasoline all over what was already a fire that maybe was starting to smolder a bit, but he poured the gas and then he lit the match. To me, that just speaks volumes about the massive obstacles that remain in place as long as people like Rocky Wirtz are still in positions of power. And, I think I wrote in the piece that sadly, there's probably a lot of other executives in the league, owners, things like that quietly would nod in agreement with what Rocky Wirtz said and did. And in their eyes, his only sin would be that he said the quiet part out loud. And what a shame that is. But, I think as ugly as that whole episode was, it was enlightening to kind of get a glimpse of just here in 2022, what the situation is like. And yeah, I find Bettman's lack of response, frankly, I said I was surprised, but the more I think about it, I'm probably not surprised. I'm disappointed for sure. But to say I'm surprised would be to say that I expected more. And frankly, I think we're past that point that, Rocky Wirtz, he's kind of part of the old boys club, right? And of course, Gary Bettman's not gonna to discipline him, and for him to explain it away and say he had a moment, we've all had moments, that was a hell of a lot more than a moment. And even Bettman's tone, right? The condescending tone, the arrogance. And at one point, I think, I don't have the wording in front of me, but he said something about what the Blackhawks have been through because of Kyle Beach.
Yeah.
Like, it's like he blamed Kyle Beach for putting the Black, as opposed to the other way around, which again, I just thought was a pretty telling off the cuff comment.
Yeah, it's clear that Gary Bettman's job isn't to look out for the good of the NHL, it's to look out for the good of each individual owner, and he'll be their shield no matter what it takes and no matter how much it debases him as a human being. But I guess the paycheck provides a nice solve for that. But in any event, Mike McIntyre is our guest Saturday morning. You're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms.
Mike, one of the things, you talked about is getting Mikkel Burden a shot. And we've seen the young Jets D prospects come up from the Moose and handle themselves. And do you think that's maybe, in an interesting sort of way, creating some sort of situation where they may start considering trading a Logan Stanley, consider trading one of their defensemen that are really, Nate Schmidt's sucking up a lot of the salary cap right now. So is Brendan Dillon. So do you think this is kind of put the Jets, because we didn't know what they had seen, right? And then all of a sudden, Chisholm comes in, he plays well. Kovacevic comes in, plays well. Heinola, well, we know he's a good young player, right? Sandberg, same thing, obviously, with the injury. So do you think that's maybe changing the way this Jets team is focusing? Because it's almost like they made a bit of an error, right? They went out, acquired these guys thinking that kids weren't ready yet. And then, oh, wait, the kids may be ready. And small sample size in the NHL, of course. But do you think that's going to maybe have them pivot a little bit for either whether it's in season or during the off season?
It absolutely should. And again, when we talk about what options do the Jets have to really make shakeup. Look, despite what Rod Peterson said on his show last week, the Jets aren't trading Connor Hellebuyck, nor should they. That wouldn't even be a consideration. So you still have that solid foundation in goal. To me, you build this team around the likes of Dubois, Connor, Ehlers, Perfetti. That's your future core right there. And on the blue line, for sure, there's some pieces there. So whether it's Brendan Dillon or Nate Schmidt, the two new additions, whether it's Josh Morrissey, I think Neil Pionk would be as close to untouchable, but maybe not. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say no to any potential deal if it could change the mix, change the chemistry of your team. And you're right, Dave. I mean, we've now seen with some of these kids, and there's only so many spots, right? I mean, we're probably not, I don't think this year is going to become the norm in terms of the number of openings. Sure, you'll get injuries in a year, but this year has been so unique because of the COVID protocols that chances are that's not going to repeat itself. So your opportunities going forward are probably going to be a little more limited. So if you think that some of these kids are ready for kind of prime time, you got to find a way then to get them in your lineup. And there's a few benefits to that, of course. Number one, their salaries are a lot less than the guys they'd potentially be replacing. But the guys they'd be replacing, you might be able to turn them into something else that helps the overall composition of your hockey team. So that's not a deal or deals that I would expect that would be made, say, by the trade deadline. To me, that's more of an off-season. If you're taking a full audit of where this team is at now and going forward, that's maybe something you'd look to do in the summer. But for sure, that's got to be on the agenda. And again, going back to what we talked about earlier, I guess the question is it Kevin Cheveldayoff that's going to make that decision, or is it somebody else that's going to make that decision?
Last question for you, Mike, then we'll let you get on with your weekend. Having seen Dave Lowry behind the bench now for a number of games, maybe still too small of a sample size, but have you seen anything, or would you say that Kevin Cheveldayoff erred in who he's named as interim head coach, as opposed to maybe going out and getting a more established NHL head coach when they were available, i.e. a guy like Bruce Boudreau, who was hired just a couple weeks earlier in Vancouver and seems to have completely turned around their fortunes this year?
Yeah, I've thought about that, and it's a hard question to answer, but I'll give it my best shot. I mean, I just wonder if this group, no matter who you put behind the bench at the time, if they were really going to have any more success than what Lowry's been able to get out of this group. And so in that sense, maybe it's been quite revealing to the organization again that their problems ran a lot deeper than who is tapping guys on the shoulder to go out, for each given shift. Coaches can only do so much. I mean, at the end of the day, you look at the composition of the 32 teams in the NHL, the talent level, there's so much parity there that it really comes down to a lot of intangibles. And I don't know how much on any given night the coach can really impact that. And to me, it's been quite revealing about this core and the makeup of this team. And so, maybe they get a few more wins if they had hired somebody with a bit of a different approach. But look, quite frankly, I like some of what Dave Lowry's done or is trying to do. Whether he's had success in bringing in, the identity, Mark Scheifele would say no, because he says we don't even have an identity. But I do like some of the buttons that Dave Lowry's pushing. It just seems like it doesn't matter who's pushing the buttons, the end result would be the same. As maybe they need to bring Paw Patrol in to solve this. Those guys solve everything, right?
That's true.
Yeah, I like Peppa, but you know what? I'm starting to come around with Paw Patrol. I can understand why it's so popular.
Well, the Jets are we're trying to put the lipstick on the proverbial Peppa Pig here, but we're running out of ways to do that.
Very nice. Mike McIntyre is the columnist with the Winnipeg Free Cut Press. He covers the Jets, of course. Mike, we'll let you get back to shoveling. It's probably been an hour since we all last shoveled, so we'll let you enjoy that fun activity, and thanks very much for joining us this weekend.
You're right, guys. Happy anniversary again, and enjoy the weekend.
Take care, Mike.
Cheers, Mike.
Thanks so much. Bye. There he goes, Mike McIntyre, our good friend and our guest this Saturday morning here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Let's head to our second break. When we come back, maybe we'll play a classic IC clip and talk more about the Winnipeg Jets. That might be fun. John Matisz of The Score joins us at the bottom of the hour. Much more to come.
I like
Stay
fun.
with us.
I think Dave likes fun too.
Dave likes fun. I like fun. You like fun.
It's a fun Saturday. I feel like, most of the time you don't like fun.
Every now and then I don't mind some fun.
Every once in a while.
In small doses. And then
I feel like Dave and I like fun all the time, whereas you're kind of like,
we're definitely fun guys.
50% of the time you like fun.
What can I do? In any event, let's go to break. We'll be right back. You're watching the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was a silly question on my part. Apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, it's Aaron from Bernstein's Deli.
That's right, Ezzy. I'm the guy who makes all your sandwich dreams come true.
So when you think Illegal Curve, what comes to you?
How about juicy chicken schnitzel, grilled salami, fried onions, melted cheddar cheese, and honey mustard on toasted, thick-cut city rye bread?
Man, that's like the holy grail of sandwiches.
And so it shall be known as the Illegal Curve Sandwich.
The Illegal Curve Sandwich. Try it today at Bernstein's Deli. Find us at Corridon and Lanark or online at bernsteinsdeli.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Hour number 2 of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show starting now. And as we've mentioned, it is our 13th anniversary. So we have to go back to some historic clips from the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, and I hope this works.
And I was with you guys, with Dave. Dave's like my chaperone. Like when I go out drinking, Dave just like is responsible for me. So
it's a hell of a job.
We stayed there.
I have a power of attorney on Ezzy, actually.
We had a few, as I said, we had some adult beverages.
I want to get to the point where at the end of the night...
Okay, you want
to skip? You want to yada yada?
I want to yada yada yada. I want to get to the point where you
parts.
told me you were making some. You got home late at night. We're not going to talk about what time.
I know you want to. Yeah.
What were you making, and how did you make it?
So basically, what the story is I got home pretty late at night that night, and I don't have a lot of food. If anybody follows me on Twitter, I had a bit of an incident with a poisonous apple.
At ICSEG.
Pretty much, my house right now is just beer, water, and chips. And I don't have a lot of food. And something that I happen to have handy, everyone has a freezer with, food. And a lot of that stuff I haven't eaten in a while. So I really didn't have any food to eat, and I needed to eat something. So I basically put some frozen pierogies and a frozen hamburger, on the element.
What do you mean on, like, directly on the element or in a bowl?
No, in like a pan.
But like, what pierogies? Do you boil pierogies?
Like a frying pan.
You can fry pierogies.
Okay, so you fried pierogies. You fried a burger?
I fried a burger with
I
fried a burger with some pierogies, and it was actually very tasty. There's a little sour cream, and that was the end of an amazing night.
Well, I actually thought, because earlier we'll get to news and notes in a second, Remus. We can get that ready to queue up. Interesting, Ezzy, because you and I had one of our best talks in a long time on Thursday night, and then you texted me the next morning and didn't remember ever being at my place.
I did not remember ever being at your place, and Dave also drove me to a convenience store that night. It was an incident. It was quite the night. It was a fun night.
There you go, a classic IC clip. Making Ezzy used to be a fun kind of guy before.
Used to be. Thanks, Drew. Used to be. Yeah, well, I think that's just a reminder. What you just played is a reminder of how much I used to drink in my early 30s and how lost I was before I met Naomi. I think that's what that clip is.
That's very much the case, is that, sometimes we, our wives, our significant others bring out the best in us. Prior to Ezzy meeting his lovely wife, that was what we had to deal with on a weekly basis.
I used to sleep on pizza and basically eat poisonous apples. That's pretty much what I was around 31 or 32 years old. I'm almost 40. We have those clips still available on this morning's show. We got the Apple story and we have the pizza story still available, Ezzy. So it's a long Saturday here as we celebrate. Is that what a legal curve is? Like, is that like our legacy after 13 years is just, me basically drinking a lot and eating food that I shouldn't be eating? Is that what our legacy is?
Yeah. Dave, you're on mute, so we can't hear you. That and Dave always Dave forgetting to unmute himself.
Yeah, well, I was going to say these are just classic Ezzyisms that we've we've had over the years, and there's been a lot of them. And 13 years of both radio and now online. I mean, it's there's a lot to reflect on, of course. So it's been a good run.
If I can get a little bit serious here, though, and a little bit sentimental, I think that's one of the reasons.
He's going to get maudlin on us, folks.
No. I promised Mess I wouldn't cry here, Drew. I think one of the reasons why we've had the longevity, right? Like 13 years, like it's incredible, Drew. Like I actually went back and I listened to part of that show back on February 4th, 2009. So we're actually 13 and 1 day, boys. Yes. Let's not forget that 1 day there. But like we started off the show after we had the website going for about 2 years. About a year and a half, because I think the website was 2007, right? And we were there in the summer. Like we would go into Kick FM and do the 2-hour show in June, July. I mean, obviously, I was gone for a couple months there. I was working in Portage La Prairie at the newspaper back in the summer of 2009. But
and selling hot dogs from a hot dog cart.
I used to sell. Yeah, shout out to I used to sell hot dogs. Hal Anderson's former cart. Shout out to Boaz Levin, Bo's Big Dogs. That was Hal Anderson's former hot dog cart, the 13th greatest Canadian. So shout out to Hal.
Coincidentally, 13.
Yeah, I think that exactly. I think one of the reasons, though, honestly, I think you guys would agree. The reason we've been doing this for so long, in addition to the fact that we have the best fans and the best people listening, the Jets community, the hockey community in general, even though there's some toxic elements of hockey culture that need to be changed. Let's not, kid ourselves, but we have great fans that are, for the most part, you get the odd, person that comes into the chat and acts like an idiot. But sorry, 34th greatest, Andy, you're right. But let's give Hal 13. I thought it was 13 for some reason. But just wanted to say that
we
have so much fun,
Canadian,
and people have got to know us, and that's why I think some once in a while I'll be walking around River Heights with my kids, and someone will say especially if I'm wearing the IC shirt or whatever, somebody will say love the show, because we've just been ourselves. So we like to give great analysis, and Dave M does an amazing job. I don't think he gets enough credit for how good of a job he does on illegalcurve.com, because it's the best source, in my opinion. I'm a little bit biased for Jets news, but that's all I wanted to say. We love doing it, and we have a good time, and I'm willing to make fun of myself, especially now looking back on it 6 or 7 years later. It's even more funny to think, that's the way I am, because obviously now I figured it all out. I'm a dad of 2, and I've got my life all together. So
he's a responsible, functioning member of society.
He's a big dumb animal, folks.
Semi-functioning.
Semi-functioning. That's okay. It's all good. In any event, let's get back to talking about the Winnipeg Jets on this Saturday morning. Mike, in some of his answers, talked a lot about the defense. And I think the defense right now is it's not an area of concern per se, but it's an area where there's a lot of moving pieces, I think, that could come to play. Now, are they going to come to play during this season? I'm not sure, but it certainly looked like that next wave of defense, Dave, as you alluded to in your question to Mike, it certainly looked like that next wave is almost ready and almost here, and might involve some decisions that the Jets probably thought they had a year or 2 years or maybe even 3 years away from having to move or having to make, particularly involving guys like Nate Schmidt and Brendan Dillon. To me, I think Josh Morrissey is still probably not an untouchable, but I think he's still in the plans. I think he's
untouchable.
Well,
I'll say he's untouchable.
Nobody's untouchable, but I would say that I would lump him in with the
Cole Perfetti's not untouchable, Drew.
Well, with the Connor, Dubois, Perfetti,
Dave M is untouchable. He's not going anywhere. Doesn't matter how much Kenny and Rennie give us, he's untouchable.
That wave of players to come forward. I think I would still have Morrissey in that next wave of guys who are going to be core members of this team. But a lot of the other guys, it's really up in the air, and it's up for grabs, especially on the back end.
Well, the only thing I would add or say about that is you now have a bit of an inkling as to what you have. And I think, as I spoke about earlier, sometimes teams and the Jets, even though they draft well and they develop these guys, sometimes they're a little loath to jump them into the NHL too early. It's almost like they're adhering to the old school Detroit Red Wings model of let them play with the Griffins, over-ripen with the Griffins, and then become Stanley Cup champions with the Detroit Red Wings. And while I don't think that's always necessarily a bad thing, because I think some guys take longer, and just because you're playing in the AHL doesn't make you a bust, as we've seen. I think that the Jets made decisions on the back end this year that, like I said, what did they add in terms of salary cap? They added about $10 million, right, in those guys. So I think part of the problem for the Jets is you've got $10 million versus guys who are on their ELCs, and now you're going to lose that ability for these young guys to be waiver exempt, right? So that'll be an issue coming up. And so what are you going to do? Because teams will take risks on grabbing a guy off the waiver. It's not even a thought. If you have a young defensive prospect who you could potentially, get for a song, why aren't you going to do it? So that's the issue the Jets have. So, and it really is that glut on the left side right now, because Chisholm's skating is excellent, and he is probably the best of the Jets prospects, probably the best skater, I would imagine. And then you've got, Samberg, who unfortunately for him has had a tough luck with injuries, obviously due to the high ankle sprain he suffered in training camp, and now of course his latest injury, which has him week to week. So, and it sounds like it'll be a little bit more time for him. So you've got some injury situations there, but you've got Johnny Kovacevic, who I believe won't be waiver exempt after this year. Sorry. So that's a guy who, big boy, can skate on your right side. Now, you don't have a ton of depth on the right, and the reality is Nate Beaulieu won't be in the Jets, even though I believe he's still signed for another year after this one. I mean, Nate Beaulieu was actually, for the record, when I was talking about people being targets, Nate Beaulieu was mentioned as someone being of interest to the Bruins potentially. So So I don't think you have to.
He's actually UFA after this season. So
he is a UFA. Okay,
yeah.
They signed him to a 2-year deal, but this is the second year of
and
that.
They signed him to that 2-year
fifth
deal.
round pick written all over it.
Yeah.
Look, if you can get a 5th round pick for Nate Beaulieu, you probably take that tomorrow.
Oh,
but they signed him to that 2-year deal because that had to do with
I know they need
expansion
it
draft
for the expansion draft. Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, how much are the Jets lamenting not because of the way they look at the defensive depth? Not having Mason Appleton on their third line right now versus Logan Stanley. I mean, again, hindsight is always 20/20, but that one's got to be hurting them. And yeah, I mean, look, you've got the right side depth in prospects. Simon Lundmark, 2019 second rounder. He's looked excellent with all the other defensemen, either on the taxi squad or playing for the Jets. He's looked very good, very calm, very kind of Dylan. Someone asked me, is he almost like a Dylan DeMello type? And I said, yeah, that's kind of the way he is. He's quiet, but he's kind of got a good all-around game. Leon Gavanke, he's had a total bounce-back season. The 2017 fifth rounder, he himself acknowledged it. He didn't have a great season last year. He's really bounced back. He's been one of the best defensemen. Him and Declan Chisholm are a great pairing. And I know you're looking at me going, is this now a Minuk Moose minute? I'm just saying that what the Jets have now is they have a lot of defensive options that could, in theory, if you need to create space, like I know the salary cap is expected to go up next year, but it's not going to be huge.
Marginally, it's going to go up by maybe $1 million bucks or something.
They anticipate it'll go up more the following year because the revenues are still fairly decent.
The Coyotes, according to Gary Bettman, are going to be a revenue generator now that they're going to play in front of 3,000 people in a college rink.
Possible because we know they're going to give away tickets too.
Well, the best is they're like, well, they could make money if they sold them for $200 a pop for 5,000 instead of like, 15,000.
I was at a Coyotes game. I think you guys have been. I think Drew's been there. I don't know, Dave, if you've been to a game there.
I promise you, when I go to Scottsdale, I have zero unless the Jets happen to be playing. I have zero inclination to drive to Glendale to watch the Arizona Coyotes.
There was the least amount of atmosphere I've ever seen at a Coyotes game. Like, it was unbelievable. I'd heard about it for years. But just wanted to get that in there, Dave. Like, it was just like we could have been watching a high school hockey game.
If they play at Arizona State University, which is what their plan is for next year, you're going to be watching them. I mean, you remember when the Senators first came into the league and they played at the old Ottawa Civic Center while they were building the rink, and
that's going way back, Drew. That's going back to the early 90s.
That's the last time, and I think a team would have played in an arena that small, because they only had stands on half the ice because the other half was Frank Clair Stadium where the Red Blacks currently play. That's where, back before they made all the renovations and demolished it, and now it's whatever TD Place or whatever in Ottawa.
Shout out to the Corral Center. That's what it was called in the beginning. So shout out to
Incorrect.
Palladium.
The Palladium. It was first called the Palladium, not the bar on Pembina Highway.
I'm like, isn't that a bar?
Yeah, that was both the bar on Pembina Highway and the original Ottawa Senators Arena in Canada was called the Palladium, and now it's, I think, Canadian Tire Center.
Mills tried to make out with me once at the Palladium. I was 18 years old. It was crazy.
Sorry, who tried to make out with you?
Just there was a cougar there, and she was trying to make out with me, and I just was. It was too much. I wasn't ready for it.
It wasn't hunting season, so as he had to pass up at the shop.
It's a shame we don't have that audio available as a classic illegal curve clip.
We now do, and it'll be ready for the 26th.
I was single at the time too, so I don't know why. I mean, I should have taken anything I could get back then, but
I'm just picturing Ezzy as an 18-year-old. Oh God, the images in my brain right now are going to be seared there for a while. This Jets team. What indication? Let me ask you guys this. Let me ask it this way: what indication, if any, have you seen that this Jets team can turn things around over the last 40 games or so?
This is what I would say to that, because I think it's a very fair question, Drew. You brought it up right before we had Mike on, and if you watch the way the Jets played against the Flyers or the Canucks, right? Because the Jets are in the middle of 8 losses in 9 games or 7 losses in 8 games. They're on a really bad losing streak right now. I think I think what's kind of the big elephant in the room, or the big elephants in the room, are Scheifele playing at an A level and Hellebuyck playing at an A level, and then you bring in Wheeler there, him even at a B+ level. I mean, and Ehlers coming back. That's the other thing, right? Like, the Jets are going to get Ehlers back around the 14th or 15th, somewhere around there.
Maybe.
So, I mean, there is a ray
At the earliest. Who knows exactly
right.
when? But
you're
maybe.
right, Drew. It could be towards the end of February, but I think the point is that the Jets are going to get Ehlers back, within the next, let's call it 3 weeks, if you want to call it that, right? But that to me is, the ray of sunshine here on a cloudy day, is that Hellebuyck can be better, Scheifele can be better, Wheeler can be better, Adam Lowry can be better. Like, I think, if you would have told most people back in October when the season started that the Jets would be at this place in the standings, just, a couple of points ahead of the Blackhawks and, a few points ahead of the Kraken. I don't think a lot of people would have thought the Kraken would be this bad, but I think that to me is really what I would be clinging on to as a Jets fan, is that, we still haven't seen the best Mark Scheifele this year. We've seen, spurts, and, we've definitely seen Connor Hellebuyck play like the Vezina Trophy winner from a couple of years ago, but certainly with the amount of games that he's played this year, 13 in a row, I mean, Hellebuyck, we already made that argument that he's probably played too much, but that's what I would say, Drew, is if you're looking, for optimism, because let's be honest, it's been a really tough year for the Jets and Jets fans when you consider, the start at 9-3-3, and since then they've been under 500. So I think that's what you're looking at. You're looking at, Scheifele as your second best center now at this point, but you're looking at him and you're saying, well, he has the possibility to really go on a nice point streak, and Hellebuyck has the ability, to shut other teams down. But aside from that, the makeup of this team, and don't get me wrong, Drew, I don't think that the Jets are going to go on a long playoff run this year, unless, something really.
This isn't the St. Louis Blues. This isn't the St. Louis Blues being dead last, firing their coach and turning things around.
And the only thing I would say, though, is in the playoffs, we know that goaltending is the great equalizer, and Hellebuyck has the ability. So I could see the Jets, winning a first round series. But if they end up playing Colorado or Minnesota in the first round, I don't like the Jets' chances.
Dave, let me ask you this. When the team returns to practice on Monday, if it looks the same, the alignment, the lines, the rotation, the deployment, if it looks the same as it did prior to the All-Star break, is that to you a sign that they just don't have any answers? Like, does it have to look different? Does the deployment have to be different for this team to improve? Or can they keep the status quo deployment and just hope that the performances get better?
Well, I mean, look, if you can keep the status quo from St. Louis or from Pittsburgh and not have the brain fart like you had in Pittsburgh.
Or in Philly.
Then, well, no, but I'm saying in Pittsburgh when they gave up
the 2 and 9 seconds. Yeah, sure.
So if you can do that with the configuration that you used, well, then you may have for yourself a winning formula. But what have we talked about? It's that C word, the consistency. And they haven't been able to consistently bring the same effort game in, game out. And as a result, you're not winning games on a consistent basis. And
I would say even period to period, Dave, they haven't been consistent.
For sure. And so, that's an issue, right? And so, but I think right now, and I think I saw it in the chat, and it's one thing I've looked at, the Jets just aren't scoring enough goals, right? Like, we can talk about Connor Hellebuyck and we can talk about the defense, but ultimately their numbers defensively aren't out of line with the best teams. Jets have given up 128 goals against. Colorado Avalanche, 129. But the Colorado Avalanche have 183 goals for. The Jets, 120.
So how do they get that offense? Is it a function of their best forwards have to be better? Is it a function of the defense that needs to get out of their own zone better?
It's finishing.
No, it's finishing.
It's finishing?
I think, well, I mean, look at the numbers. We've talked about it. Who are the only guys who are performing above their heads? Kyle Connor, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and you can throw Andrew Kopp in there because he's having a decent season. And Nikolai Ehlers was 13 goals in 34 games. That's not terrible. But, I mean, look at it. And Paul Stastny having 11 goals in 31 at his age is solid. Then look afterwards. Blake Wheeler, 2 goals. Evgeny Svechnikov, 3 goals. Adam Lowry, 3 goals. Jansen Harkins, 4 goals. Dominic Tonnato, 3 goals. Cole Perfetti, 1 goal in 12 games. Christian Vesalainen, 2 goals in 38 games. Austin Baganski, 0-9. So, I mean, you have no goal scoring with the exception of Kyle Connor and Pierre-Luc Dubois. It's not enough. It's really, I mean, hockey isn't a complicated game. Teams talk about systems, but really they're all just variations of one another. And the truth is, it's like, the old KISS, keep it simple, stupid principle, but it's just goal scoring. I mean, it's as simple as that. And now how do you do that? I mean, I one of the other comments in the chat was right. We all questioned the value of breaking up the Svechnikov, Connor, and Dubois line when Paul Maurice did that because they were going. Mm-hmm. And even though Svechnikov wasn't producing a ton of goals, he seemed to be working on that line. And as a result, it gave the opportunity. Now they've got Perfetti there. And I said this the other day, maybe Perfetti would serve well playing with Mark Scheifele, getting him going to some degree. Maybe, and I know some people said, don't do that because, his bad habits can impact Perfetti's, but Perfetti's got a long runway. So, I don't think he's going to pick anything up.
Why wouldn't you? Sorry, I was just going to say though, Dave, why wouldn't you try that? Right? Like the way Scheifele, Kopp, and Wheeler have played. It's not like they've been absolutely lights out. No, like they've been okay together. So why not spread the wealth?
Well, and the truth is, I thought Wheeler looked good when he played with Adam Lowry. So, you could, you could have Stastny with Lowry and Wheeler as a third line that might actually be able to score some goals because your third line doesn't ever score. You could have, Svechnikov with Dubois and Connor. We know they'll still score. And then you could either do Stastny if you want to put Kopp instead of Stastny on the third line. You could have Stastny, Perfetti, and Scheifele, which is probably a line that's going to contribute. So to me, you're balancing, and then your fourth line would be Pagansky, Toninato, and Harkins, which to me would be a line that could hold. So, I just don't understand the way I don't understand why Evgeny Svechnikov is in the doghouse because he's played in the role, in the time he's played, he's been a very good soldier for the Winnipeg Jets. And I just think like there are opportunities, but it's simple. Just this team doesn't score enough goals as I outlined. And if they don't, well, you can't win hockey games without scoring. I don't care how good your defense is, right? They've got they're 40 goals less than the Minnesota Wild. Who thought the Minnesota Wild would be a juggernaut compared to the Winnipeg Jets? They've got 24 goals less than Nashville and 34 goals less than St. Louis. These teams are all outperforming you. That's a goal or 2 goals per game more than your Jets team is getting. And if that's happening, you can't win hockey games. It's as simple as that.
The Jets shooting percentage 25th in the NHL at 5-on-5 at 7.1%. Conversely, their 5-on-5 save percentage, much better, 12th in the NHL at a .924 save percentage. So it truly does come back to needing better goal scoring prowess from a team that seemed to have it in spades before the season began. Let's go to our final break. When we come back, John Matisz, national hockey writer from The Score, joins us on the show. You're listening, you're watching, you're chatting with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. It's a Saturday morning. Stay with us.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hi, Ez. A strange question for you. But why are you lying on the ground being crushed by a piano?
Well, Drew, I definitely tried to carry this baby grand piano down the stairs by myself, and somehow I failed miserably.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, that was a silly question on my part. My apologies. Would you like me to call Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage to help you move the piano? They are the most experienced piano moving company in Winnipeg, after all.
Yes, please call Rolly's and hurry. This piano is very, very heavy.
Rolly's Transfer Moving and Storage offers stress-free residential moving services while taking great care of your personal belongings, including your piano. At Rolly's, no job is too big or too small. For more information, visit rollys.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
Hey, it's Aaron from Bernstein's Deli.
That's right, Ezzy. I'm the guy who makes all your sandwich dreams come true.
So when you think illegal curve, what comes to you?
How about juicy chicken schnitzel, grilled salami, fried onions, melted cheddar cheese, and honey mustard on toasted, thick-cut city rye bread?
Man, that's like the holy grail of sandwiches.
And so it shall be known as the illegal curve sandwich.
The illegal curve sandwich. Try it today at Bernstein's Deli. Find us at Corridon and Lanark or online at bernsteinsdeli.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal. Starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Saturday morning, bottom of the hour. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Pleased to welcome back to the program our very good friend John Matisz, senior NHL writer with The Score. John, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. How are things?
Things are well. How about you guys? My dog is barking. I'm just going to let her out the room.
Okay.
Great start to the appearance.
That's
second.
Okay. Perfectly reasonable. That's always how it works with dogs and things of that nature.
Hey, that's what happens with a live hockey show, right? John's got to let the dog out. I mean, dogs got to eat and walk, right?
We now know the answer to the question: who let the dogs out?
That's right. It was John who let the dogs out, and I think you have to start barking now, John, in honor of the song that we're singing.
Yeah, I mean, like that was planned, right? This is an all-star related podcast, and we saw that Allen show that DeBrincat put on last night. So I just decided to chime in here with a little bit of flavor and flair.
Well, we appreciate you bringing your A game. That's thinking outside the box on your appearances here on the program. We always appreciate you doing that, John. Obviously you mentioned it is All-Star Weekend, and basically it's almost the halfway point for a lot of teams, or most teams, or it's such a wild schedule with some having played so many more games than some other teams with COVID and everything else. If you had a sort of a grand takeaway from the first half of the NHL season, what would it be? I mean, or takeaways, plural, whatever it might be, sort of as you sit back and you sort of reflect on the first 40, 45 games, whatever the number is, what is your takeaway on the season so far?
Yeah, I mean, when you say takeaways or grand observations, I mean, it's hard not to think of the creativity of some of the goals. That comes to mind immediately. Trevor Zegras, who's obviously at All-Star Weekend to strut his stuff in the creative realm, as he showed last night. He's a big part of it. All these lacrosse goals, like it's become commonplace, essentially, right? And I don't think it's going to stop. I mean, it was crazy when we saw Brian Boyle, one of the most like meat and potatoes players of the last, 2 decades. Obviously has a ton of skill compared to us schlubs, but essentially a third, fourth liner his whole career. He goes between the legs and scores a beautiful goal like a couple weeks ago. I can't remember exactly who was against or the context, but that summed things up pretty well for me, where it's like the way the game is structured, coming up through the ranks, and then at the pro level, skill is at such a premium. It's such an important part of it, and the rules are allowing for it. The reason why a Brian Boyle can pull that off is because no one's going to cross-check him in the face when he's alone in the slot. So that comes to mind. And then also just the disparity or the difference between the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference. I think that jumps out at the halfway point, or whatever we're calling this, the All-Star break point. Because in the East, I mean, it's going to be a bit of a gauntlet in the playoffs. Florida looks like an absolute buzzsaw offensively, just relentless with their attack, and it's really fun to watch them just move that puck around. And there's just so many weapons on that team, and I just think that they built their team very well with how they're playing. They're very scary. Tampa Bay, I think, is kind of flying under the radar in a little bit here. Toronto, Carolina, the Rangers, we'll see what they're able to do down the stretch here. And Pittsburgh's picked up the pace significantly in the second quarter of the season. So you have 5 like very likely, cup contenders there. And then in the West, it's like Colorado, Vegas, and then I think there's a drop off. You can look at that multiple ways. You can look at that and go, well, a Nashville or maybe an LA or a St. Louis, these imperfect teams that are solid, can they go on a run just by one upset? If they upset Colorado, well, they only have to beat this Vegas team at some point to get to the final. Like, it's kind of interesting in that respect. So boring on one hand with the East and the playoff races there. I guess you're jockeying for position, but like it's pretty much wrapped up 1 through 8. And then the West is almost the opposite, where there's going to be a fair amount of movement. The Oilers are obviously a huge story in and of themselves in terms of what they've been doing and not doing, and in regards to how that roster is built and their performance, and Draisaitl and McDavid carrying them. So, yeah, to answer your question, Drew, I think the conference disparity is one, and I think just the creativity in the game is just it's at such a high level right now. It's hard to ignore.
Yeah, John, unless Evander Kane can stop pucks, I don't think the Oilers are a Stanley Cup contender yet, even with McDavid and Draisaitl. I agree with you. I've been saying, anybody that listens to the show this year knows that I've been saying that. I didn't think the disparity is that big at the beginning of the year. But yeah, I think the Eastern Conference is much better. I agree. The Western Conference is just so top heavy. I wanted to ask you about last night's All-Star Skills Competition. Then obviously, we want to ask you a few questions about the great article that you had for The Score, canvassing some of the hockey world's goalie experts, talking about, who the real elite goaltenders are. And, Jets fans have already been told that are listening to this show that Connor Hellebuyck, don't freak out. Connor Hellebuyck is an elite goaltender, even though, we still want everyone to read that article. But what did you think about the skills competition? Because I realize that everyone kind of writes the All-Star game off, especially the actual, game itself. But I actually really liked it. Like the blackjack, you could say it was, ridiculous. And you could say that, shooting the pucks at the targets, at the floating targets, in the Bellagio water was a little bit over the top. But I really liked it. You mentioned, some of the, the breakaway, competition, Alex DeBrincat, and obviously, Trevor Zegras. That move was just incredible. I still don't know how he does some of those things, but what were kind of your impressions of the All-Star Skills Competition yesterday? Because I thought it was actually very entertaining.
Yeah, and I think, in the lead up to All-Star Weekend, there's always this buzz about how can we change it? Why do we care about this thing? It's only for the fans and the sponsors, and then you watch it and you're like, look at all the different jerseys in the crowd. Look at how many kids are there. Look at how the players are letting loose a little bit. Like, I think we forget that this isn't supposed to be serious. This isn't supposed to be, you've been picked for the All-Star game. That means you're a top player. It's very gimmicky. I mean, they pick a player from each team. That'll, like, you're discrediting the entire thing off the bat there, right? So there's that, and it kind of dovetails into the events themselves. I'm all in on doing wacky and wild things. I think this is your one chance to not take yourself so seriously as a league. I think it's your one chance to every year try something new. And with Vegas, obviously, that's ripe for different avenues, different events. And I thought the ones that they did last night were good. I mean, the fountain one was pretty entertaining. That fact that they had to whack the puck to light it up, I felt like that was a bit of a trick or a curveball thrown at them, and we saw Roman Josi kind of struggle with it at the end. And the breakaway challenge, I mean, was very entertaining. That's one where it's like so gimmicky that it can get like almost uninteresting because you're like, okay, enough with the gimmicks. But I felt like it was tasteful enough. So I'm sort of in the camp, and I've changed over the years with this, maybe because I've just decided to take things a little less seriously day to day. But I'm in the camp of like this is supposed to be silly. It's supposed to be for sponsors and for fans and just about showing off pure skill. And that's, in my opinion, the only way to do it where the players are actually going to care. And by care, I mean like show up. Or be creative, like we saw with Zegras. Like, if you put any parameters on him, well, guess what? He's going to go, okay, well, I'm just going to do something really simple, and it's going to be boring.
And they've also got, sorry, John, they've also got the old skills for the traditionalists, right? Like, they've still got fastest skater, they've still got the targets, they've still got the hardest shot, right? So I agree with you.
Yeah, I just think that you know, the All-Star game is what it is. It used to be way more buttoned up and serious. I think of, you know, Gretzky and Lemieux playing on the same line together. People were all excited about that. I just think it's swung so far the other way that you got to embrace how, I guess, unofficial and how informal it is. And these guys play 82 games. They want a break in their schedule. So this is a way to give them a break, but also to entertain the fans. So I'm pro modern all-star, whereas some people are like, this is so lame, this is, you know, too silly. It's like, you know, let's get over ourselves.
I think they missed a great cross-promotional opportunity with Jackass the movie debuting yesterday. I think they really could have incorporated some Jackass stunts into the skills competition. That sure, you might have lost a player or two or had them brutally injured, but think about the entertainment value.
Well,
I would have watched.
Yeah, I think Johnny Knoxville's still recovering from the Royal Rumble, so I think he's going to need a few more weeks.
Something like that. I don't know if I've got less mature or whatnot, but you know, some of those stunts they're doing are very entertaining. Go ahead, Dave.
No, John, I was going to say, but whose job is it to get those pucks from the bottom of the Bellagio fountain? Because I can't imagine those are like a standard, those fancy red pucks. I thought we were watching the old Fox, Fox glow in the dark pucks. So I can't imagine all those pucks at the bottom of the Bellagio fountain are inexpensive. So I suspect they'll be sending someone to dive down and grab all the ones that went amiss.
Well, and this is a content business, right? At the end of the day, especially with social media and the way that leagues and teams can really drum up interest in their players. So, you know, Dave, I know you're joking about it, but like they could strap a GoPro on a scuba diver and go get the pucks, and like people will watch that on TikTok or Instagram, right? Like there's just so much there, especially with Vegas as the backdrop. I mean, it's the most no-brainer destination you could ever have for an all-star game, and I believe they're going to Florida next year, which again, you got to appeal to the players. As stupid as that sounds, because they're millionaires and they should be, you know, grateful for this opportunity. Once you go once, I mean, and you take your family there and whatever, it's like it's the same old story, and you know, you're doing a lot of media, which a lot of the guys would rather not do, and there's no like real competition to it. So I understand where they're coming from when they're not that interested, as Alex Ovechkin has made it known over the years. But
oops, so on my rapid test, I tested positive all of a sudden. Oops. Imagine how that happened.
Yeah, it is curious timing. I mean, I hate joking about that kind of stuff because you know the sickness and just how serious this virus is. But like, yeah, I mean, it's suspect, the timing of that.
I don't blame them though. I mean, the fact that they make players go is, to me, a little bit, you know, relax a little bit. Don't take yourself so seriously. If a guy doesn't want to go, what are you going to do? Make him go and have him be miserable for 3 days? His commitment is to his team, not to your corporate sponsors would be, you know. So if a guy doesn't want to go, send somebody else. Send a guy on your team who hasn't necessarily been there before or who might relish the opportunity. You don't think Tom Wilson's having the time of his life there? Of course he is. Ovechkin's been there, done that. You know, you should get there should be a level of service you get where you no longer have to do the sort of
actually Ovechkin hasn't been there. He's taken the 1-game suspensions, Drew.
You know what I meant. He's been there enough that he doesn't care about it anymore, and the 1-game suspension isn't a deal breaker. In any event, Dave, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, just to cut in like very shortly here, I think also it would be nice if the hockey world embraced the end of season all-stars. So you have the first team all-star, second team, and you know, this is supposed to be an honor, right? But no one talks about it. Whereas in the NBA, it's the all NBA team. People take it really seriously. So if you sort of separate the two and it's like all NHL, then the all-star game could just be a bunch of random players, essentially like, oh, you've got a hard shot, come on down. And it's not like this sort of official designation of being an all-star. It can be a little more, I guess, informal, which is in the spirit of the event in general. So maybe we need to get more excited about the end of year all-stars so we can reshape what the mid-season all-stars are all about.
Sort of the difference between, to your point, John, the difference between the Pro Bowl in the NFL and the All-Pro team. The All-Pro team is truly the All-Stars, whereas the Pro Bowl is just, you know, whichever last few guys haven't already opted out, because I think that's tomorrow, and it's like, you know, Kirk Cousins is, you know, I'm a Vikings fan. Everyone who's a Vikings fan knows that Kirk Cousins is not a Pro Bowl quarterback or an All-Pro quarterback. He might be a Pro Bowl quarterback, but it's definitely different. In any
my
event,
son wanted to say hi to you, John. That's why my son popped on there.
Hi, Ezra's son. I have no idea what your name is, but hi.
It's Ruben.
Ruben, yeah.
Ruben.
Yeah.
Like the sandwich.
Exactly. It shouldn't become as a surprise that Ezzy named his kids after food. John Matisz, senior NHL writer of The Score, is our guest here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Saturday morning, we're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms.
John, you've been writing a lot of great articles about goaltending this year, so we got to talk about your most recent one. Who's truly elite? Taking stock of the NHL goaltending landscape. So maybe fill in our audience about what you learned in writing this article.
Sure. I mean, the basis of it was basically, I can have my opinions about goalies. I can, from afar, say X, Y, and Z about goalie X, Y, and Z. But I find that the actual people who are around the position every day, goalie coaches, people who write about goalies exclusively, a guy like Darren Pang on the TNT broadcast, who was a former NHL goalie, I feel like they just have a stronger grasp of the position, the technicality involved, and just a better feel of the landscape. So, long story short, I decided to do a roundtable and just pick their brains about various topics. And I thought, leading up to the All-Star game and All-Star weekend, why not? Because there's some All-Stars, and, this kind of goes with the theme of our discussion here. Some of them just kind of got picked because they needed another goalie. So we talked about the Vezina, and that was more or less Igor Shesterkin's trophy to lose heading into the second half, with UC Saros, making a case. His workload is significant. He's arguably more of an MVP for Nashville than Shesterkin is for New York, because there's just more firepower. There's more star talent on New York, and on Nashville, it's like Roman Josi and UC Saros, and obviously there's other good players, but those guys are the bus drivers of that team. And then there's obviously some other names you can throw in there for the Vezina. Jari's having a very good year. And then I decided to ask these guys about who's truly elite, and I used specifically truly elite because it changes every season who's up for the Vezina, but there are some, I guess, tentpole players who are always elite, or if they're having a bad season, it doesn't mean that they're not elite. So Connor Hellebuyck of the Winnipeg Jets, perfect example. He's been challenging Andrei Vasilevsky for best goaltender in the world for the past 5 years or so, right? It's been mostly Vasilevsky, but there's been times where you go, I want Hellebuyck in my net for Game 7, and that's kind of the question that gets people to go one way or the other. So in that category, there was a pretty big variance when you got past Vasilevsky, Saros, and Hellebuyck. Some guys decided, Shesterkin, not enough body of work here. I don't know if I can call him truly elite. We love what he's been doing so far, but let's pump the brakes a little bit on crowning this guy the next big thing. And there was obviously some variance there in terms of the guys who are having bad years. Marc-Andre Fleury playing in front of the Chicago Blackhawks. That's a tough sell in terms of getting some good results there. So he was a guy that Darren Pang, for example, brought up, where, I mean, the track record is pretty phenomenal, but Fleury, his raw stuff, his save percentage is rarely that high. And last year he wins the Vezina, arguably his career year. So anyways, long story short, I just tried to get to the bottom of that and tried to figure out, with all this noise around goaltending, they're the most valuable position, night to night, week to week, month to month, season to season. And they can be the GOAT, where they let in a bad goal and the team loses the game, or they can be the hero, where they make that last second save. So very difficult position, I think, to analyze. And I thought that I'd tap a couple people to give me some help. And I guess my biggest takeaway would be Igor Shesterkin is an absolute stud, an absolute, not to put the cart before the horse. Well, I guess I will, but he'll probably end up in the Hall of Fame. He's on a really high and strong trajectory here, where he absolutely destroyed the KHL, had huge numbers in the AHL, and then through, I don't have his numbers in front of me, but less than 100 games in the NHL, very consistent, very reliable. This is not a fluke. So you wonder where he goes with this, as I believe he's 26. He's quite young for a goalie. So that was my biggest takeaway as a guy who knew Shesterkin was phenomenal, but didn't really know how he's progressing and where he might go with this.
To your point there, John, you talk about goaltenders and elite goaltenders, and you mentioned the Florida Panthers earlier, because they've certainly been a fantastic story all year long. They've been the best team in the NHL for a lot of the year, right there with Colorado. Their goaltending this year has been solid. Sergei Bobrovsky been very good this year. Do you trust him come playoff time to be able to go out there and beat a guy like Vasilevsky in a 7-game series, because that's, unless Toronto knocks off Tampa Bay or however it ends up playing out, Bobrovsky's going to have to go beat one of those elite guys to get their team to where they think they can be this year.
I don't know if I fully trust him, but Bobrovsky's a really interesting case where he has 2 Vezinas already, and he's obviously had other strong seasons, but when he's bad, he's really bad. There's a reason why we were all excited about Spencer Knight coming into the season. I believe actually on your guys' podcast, we talked about it, and I might have mentioned, like, watch out for the Calder race, but also like maybe he'll get some votes for the Vezina. That's obviously been wrong because, one, he hasn't played a ton because of Bobrovsky, but when he has played, Knight hasn't been up to his own standards. Mind you, he's 20 years old. I'm sure he'll be fine. But to get back to Bobrovsky, from what I gather, and I talked to Adam Francilia, who you guys know, I know you've had him on your podcast before. He works with Hellebuyck. He works with Frederick Anderson. He's a bit of a goalie guru in a lot of ways where, we throw that word around haphazardly sometimes, guru. But this guy he does the physical side of the training, and then he does the actual coaching, and he does the mental side. So he's like a holistic trainer / coach, we'll call him. And he was open to talk about, guys who are his clients and who aren't his clients for this piece. And he was pretty high on Bobrovsky still. And no one else mentioned them in their quote unquote truly elite tier. So Francilia, his take was basically he's fixed. I think I'm trying to remember the timeline that he described to me, but basically he said coming out of the pause of 2019-20, where we went into the bubble for the playoffs, he's been a different goalie than he was previously, the previous 2 or 3 years, where he fixed some things in his games, his technical ability. And, I'm not going to pretend to know what those are off the top of my head. But that, to me, if a goalie person is saying, listen, like he's back to form, that gives me some hope. But I think my pause with your question with Florida going up against Tampa, for example, is just Vasilevsky is just so above and beyond reliable. He's the guy that has 1-2 Stanley. Like the body of work is there, the proof of concept is there, that I find it really hard to get past Vasilevsky in a head-to-head with another goalie. It could be Shesterkin, and he's still as hot as he's been all season playing him in the playoffs, Vasilevsky. And I'd still go with Vasilevsky because you don't really know what a goalie's like in the playoffs until you see them go on a deep run. And again, like, this isn't goaltending isn't in a vacuum, right? It's about their environment. It's about not letting in bad goals at the wrong time. It's about making those key saves. Like, it's a very complicated thing to just judge in a vacuum. But this is a really long way of saying I think Florida is fine in general. I think Bobrovsky's having a very good year, and I don't think we should discount him just kind of out of the blue. But I think his past transgressions gives you pause. And the way that Florida is built, I think they're the type of team, like, they're putting up ridiculous offensive numbers. I think they're the type of team that if they're playing, I'm trying to think, like a Boston, for example, like a team that's going to make the playoffs, but isn't exactly blowing the doors off the NHL right now. I think that they can beat Boston in a series if they win games that are 5-4, 5-3. Like, if they're putting up the offensive numbers, I think Bobrovsky can lead them to a series victory. It gets dicey when you get up against Tampa and you've got Vasilevsky standing on his head. So that's a difficult question. I don't really know, but I think Florida's fine. It's not like they need to go out and get a goalie at the deadline by no stretch of the imagination. So I don't know if that even answers your question because I've gone in circles.
It's all good.
Here, but
I
think Florida at the end of the day is fine with Bobrovsky. Will be my answer.
So John, you just mentioned Boston, and I really liked your article yesterday. I believe it was yesterday or Thursday, one of the two, talking about Claude Giroux and Boston possibly being, a suitor for Claude Giroux. And of course, the Jets just played the Flyers. Obviously didn't go very well for the Jets, losing 3-1. But I don't think enough people are talking about Claude Giroux and how interesting the situation is. You mentioned in the article, Chuck Fletcher has said, we're only going to trade him if Giroux wants to be traded. And obviously, it could be a rental, right? Last year of a contract, pending UFA. So I was going to ask what you think the return might be. And, there's obviously other teams that might be interested. You mentioned, Colorado might be one of those teams. You mentioned the Minnesota Wild, the Calgary Flames. Like, could you get like a player, a prospect, and a first rounder? Or is it kind of difficult to say that a team would give up that much, considering that there is a good chance that he could just be a rental for a team?
No, I think it's a first rounder and a top prospect. It's just a market that's been set over the years for star players at the deadline. I think you see like Nick Foligno went for a first rounder last year. Last year.
Yeah.
Like Claude Giroux is a really interesting player right now because he actually reminds me of Phil Kessel in a way where when Kessel was with the Maple Leafs, when he was their best player, like he was miscast, right? Because you can't win in this league when Phil Kessel is your star. And then he goes to Pittsburgh and he's on the third line. He drives a third line to a championship. Very important to the Penguins Cup that year. I feel like it's similar with Giroux, where he's on this Flyers team that is an absolute mess. And obviously they have good players in Farabee. They have good players in Couturier, but the season is just so messed up that Giroux is one of the only bright spots. So you take him from there, you put him in a good environment. Let's just say Boston, for example, on the second line. I think that's a really good fit. I think you have a 34-year-old Giroux who used to be one of the best players in the world. Like there was a point, I don't know if you guys remember this, where I can't remember who said it. There was a coach. I don't think it was Giroux's coach. I think it was an opposing coach who said he's as good as Crosby right now. And this is like in Crosby's prime. So Giroux, he's not who he used to be, but he's still a guy who can blend into your team in a very effective way. And that's where I bring the comparison of Kessel in, where right now on the Flyers, is Giroux the type of guy that can carry that team to the playoffs? Well, first of all, it's such a mess there that I don't think anyone could. But second of all, if it wasn't, I just don't think he's at that caliber of player at 34. So you put him on the Flames, you put him on the Bruins, you put him on the Avalanche, you put him somewhere else. I think that there's a really good fit there, and I think you're going to have to pay a premium because he's going to have the pressure off of not being the captain in this new scenario. He's going to be probably not on the first line. You look at Calgary, for example, their first line is absolutely dominant, like stupidly dominant. You're not breaking up that trio of Lindholm, Tkachuk, and Gaudreau, if I'm getting my names right. I know it's Gaudreau and Lindholm for sure.
Yeah, that's right, John. You got it.
Okay. And then, so you slide him in on the second line, and that's a tremendously improved line. Maybe Monahan's on the third line. Maybe Giroux's on Monahan's wing. Like, you can really work your magic there and put Backlund a little further down. So I just think it's always weird, right? Going into the trade deadline, we're still like essentially 2 months away. It's always weird because some guys get so hyped up when it's like, for example, Ben Sherratt, like everyone's getting excited about him. It's like, okay, he's a depth defenseman. What's he really going to do? He might help you in the playoffs. He might be important to the Cup champion, but he's not going to move the needle in a way that I think Giroux could. I think that he's a legit rental. The problem is that he makes $8.275 million a year. So when you're trading for him, money's either got to go the other way, or a third team needs to be involved because
hello, Arizona Coyotes.
Yeah, exactly. And like I was looking at the landscape for teams that might be a good landing spot for him, and all these teams are either capped out or like $2 or $3 million from the cap. So there's got to be some juggling going on there. But you look at a team like Colorado, for instance, it's like, if you're Joe Sakic, are you just gonna leave some chance into this season, or are you gonna go all in? Like let's not screw around anymore. And Colorado hasn't been at the level of Toronto in terms of choking in the playoffs, but they've been an elite team in the regular season for a few years here, and they're going to have to pay Nathan McKinnon soon. Like, they're sort of in this window where this year is a really important year for them. So you don't want to leave anything to chance. And I think that even though their offense is prolific, I don't think Giroux would be a bad acquisition for them. I think their goaltending's fine, their defense is fine. Like, they don't really have any major needs, but if the opportunity presents itself, they should go after Giroux, as should the Calgarys of the world and the Bostons of the world.
John Matisz is the senior NHL writer for The Score. John, always appreciate your time. Always appreciate your insight. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I feel like I rambled a lot. This maybe too much coffee, but appreciate you guys.
No way, John. We love it.
Energy. We like the energy.
All right. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, John.
Thanks, John.
Cheers.
Take care. There he goes, John Matisz from The Score, joining us on the program. Hell of a strong interview in which to end our 13th anniversary program here on this Saturday.
I just figured we'd go long.
Yeah, we did.
Drew, maybe we should go old school. Why don't we just do another hour of the show?
Because you know, some of us have children that want to spend some quality time with their fathers.
Well,
as Drew been joining the show.
I was gonna say, just do what Ezzy's kids do. They just
Yeah,
join the show.
It's
They
true.
can
I
just
could do
join.
that.
There's nothing stopping them.
Yeah, let's get Sam and Aaron in here, Drew.
Yeah, no, Sam and Aaron don't want to come into the bomb shelter portion of the basement where I do the broadcast from here, into the electrical room with its hanging wires and all sorts of other creepy crawly sort of things. Before we wrap up today, I want to say a big thank you to our sponsors. They make this show. They make the website. They make the post-game show a possibility. Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Zappia Group Realty, Bernstein's Deli, Tough Duck, Boston Pizza, Seagram's, Rolly's Transfer, and Grid Park support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. They have been with us for so many years, and we all appreciate their support and dedication to the program. Same for the support and dedication that everybody that's watching or listening or chatting with us shows us on a weekly basis and after every Winnipeg Jets game. We appreciate that. Tell a friend. That's what we want you to do now. We want you to smash the like button. I'm sure you've already done that. I'm sure you've already subscribed to our YouTube channel and subscribed to the podcast. Tell a friend, tell a Jets friend in your life, tell a hockey friend in your life to come check out the Illegal Curve Hockey YouTube channel and, of course, illegalcurve.com.
I would tell a friend, but I don't have any friends.
Be part of the Drew. Be part of the community. Be part of the conversation.
There you go. Be part of the community. Be part of the conversation. Very true. Dave, Illegal Curve Hockey is your home for hockey in Manitoba, and wherever you may reside, we always appreciate your support and want to see you back here on Tuesday night, as it's going to be a very busy week of Jets games. Tuesday night, the post-game show.
What about an all-star post-game show, boys? We're not going to do that tonight.
I won't be there.
We got a Moose game tonight, and we got a Moose game tomorrow afternoon, boys. So
that's true. Dave's got Moose coverage on the website.
We got a 4-game series coming up against the Texas Stars and the Manitoba Moose. So
play Dave's intro right now.
Hang on, Dave. Put on your antlers. It's time for the Minuk Moose Minute on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Wow. I complained about the lack of Des, you're muted. I complained.
I was going to say, Drew put some work in there, Dave.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Changed the font, added some images.
Dave criticized the production value. So
I may have something in the works, but I appreciate Drew, going to the archives, getting some good IC photography over the years and throwing together a new intro. But
when Dave says he has something in the works, it means he's leaving Illegal Curve and starting his own full 2-hour Minuk Moose hours.
I know.
Anyways, the point is, I've already done one because we talked about all the Jets, the prospects on the Moose, so I'm not going to do a Minuk Moose Minute per se.
Moose coverage on the website.
But I will have Moose coverage all weekend long. So we're going to have lots on illegalcurve.com. You can follow it on the Illegal Curve Twitter account or on my own IC Dave. But should be a good series. It's going to be fun because it's kind of like old school, old school being last year, of course, because it's a 4-game series against Texas. First 2 here in Winnipeg. Last night was supposed to be the first game. It got postponed because there's poor weather in Texas. I think they're getting, they got like a centimeter of snow, which
inclement weather.
Yeah, it throws off their entire system. So the game got postponed from Friday to Sunday afternoon. So game 1 will be tonight. Game 2 will be Sunday, and then they're going to play games 3 and 4 in Texas. So Texas and Manitoba had quite a few fireworks in the last time they played. So it should be a fun game and should make for a fun, entertaining series. And again, like I said, if you get a chance, this is going to be the last. It'll be interesting because these are the last 2 games with just 250 fans in the building. And then after, obviously, Tuesday, we'll see an increase for the Jets to about 7,500. For the Moose, about 4,400 because they don't play with the upper deck. So they could have up to about 4,400. And folks really should come to a game because you're watching a phenomenal team that could have a chance to win the Calder, and B, you're watching all of these Jets prospects who are phenomenal to watch. So
and tonight's game is Pride, is it not?
Tonight's the Pride game, yeah.
I saw those shirts; those are awesome. If you have a chance, I'm not sure if they're going to be available to the public or just people at the game.
I think they do. I think
those
they sell
shirts
them.
are sweet.
I think the Moose do generally sell that kind of stuff. And hey, look, you know what? You got to give their team credit. They do a very good job in terms of like for the autism awareness. They do a great jerseys. All the various causes that the Moose support around the community. I mean, that's one of the things that I think gets lost when because so much focus is on the Jets. But I think that the Moose are the team that you see actually more out in the community. They do traditionally when there's, we don't have to deal with COVID and stuff like that, but you see them, they go to the zoo where they're interacting. I mean, how often do you get a chance to go up, meet them, get autographs? You don't do that with the Jets, right? And
they got to see me in my natural habitat, right, Dave?
That
That's
is true.
Zoo, undoubtedly.
Anyway,
there
so
you go.
Lots of Moose coverage to come over the next little bit as well with the Manitoba Moose.
Thanks to everybody for joining us on this Saturday morning. Reminder, post-game Tuesday night, 9:45 p.m. Until then, keep it locked on illegalcurve.com for all your latest Manitoba Moose and Winnipeg Jets news. For Dave Minuk, for Ezra Ginsburg, I'm your host, Drew Mindell. Thanks for celebrating 13 years with us until Tuesday night. We'll see you then. This has been the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Peace.